All right, all right, all right. Hello there, all. This is K Rod here, back at it with another show for you guys today. We got like another little libertarian, pep talk for my little philosophy talk with Mr. Libertarian Views, Scotty M. We have like another good show for you guys today, so I'm going to be having like a pretty good conversation with them, and I have a lot on my mind, so without further ado, let's get Scott up in here, and yeah, let's get this started. Hey, what's up, Scott?
All right, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Yeah, things are not too bad, mate. Not too bad.
Yeah. It was very hot today here in New York. A very hot day today.
Oh, your temperatures are absolutely crazy over there. Honestly, God, man. Like, see the average temperature here, you're talking about, like, see at night time it'll drop. Like, there's no such thing as hot weather at night time, man. It'll drop like 14 degrees Celsius or something, or 11 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So it's just the way Scotland is. It's been a lot of rain recently, but that's Scotland for you.
Oh, that's crazy, man. I wasn't thinking that at this time of the year the weather would be that bad. I like honestly, like I don't understand like why some people in Europe tell me some misinformation, but anybody that I speak to, whether it's from the UK or Germany or France or any of those nations, they usually tell me like during the summertime, in America, like it's usually getting closer to winter, and I would think that due to the temperature changes, it's mostly due to mainly due to like the mountains being being closer to the colder front. So I would assume like Britain and France and Germany would get winter a lot more sooner compared to like the U.S. So like if I'm in New York, like basically winter comes around by December time, but I would assume that winter comes like a lot sooner.
It's been a bit, it's like, it's been a bit, how do I put it? Like, see if you were to compare years and years ago, like when I was younger and that, I was born in the 80s, so, throughout from my younger years, throughout the 90s and stuff like that, you would typically see heavy snow by December. You see, in recent years, it's been a bit funny because in the past decade or so, don't get me wrong, sometimes it can be different. But see, like in general, the winter can sometimes come late. So it'll be like February or March or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fucking weird, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are they're too misinformed about how geography works, and then once you hear those people that claim climate change is actually real type nonsense, they don't understand that everywhere in the world is changing. So it's like seasons come about every single day. So
exactly, I've always argued all it is just really a time cycle. I seen a post the other day. Somebody had shared all that. Like you always hear about the ice melting and whatever, and it was some sort of thing warning that, in about 5 years' time, this ice will melt and all the rest of this, and yet it's been 13 years since then and nothing's happened to it. You know what I mean? It's typical.
yeah, I think it's pretty stupid how people think how the world is going to act, because it's kind of like thinking that you're going to talk into like the future and like what's going to happen, but it's like that's like a pretty psychopathic way of thinking. So it's like trying to predict science is not the way to go.
That's true enough. You know what I mean? It's one of these things that it's just absolute crazy that folk think they can honestly just change the weather themselves, simply by giving government money. Oh yes, if we just hand our money over to government will just magically make it just disappear. More like kiss my arse.
Don't worry, the environmental government regulations will save everybody. Yeah. All right, so I got a lot to talk about with a lot of topics. I wanted to get your take on this, but I had like some pretty good hot topics that people were talking about within like the economic and political sphere, and I wanted to start out with I was gonna do Trump first, but I'll probably do Argentina first because there was like there were some claims through the libertarian circles that I've been listening to, and a lot of people are making the claim to say that Javier Milei, he's actually doing good in Argentina with like the inflation situation, and I wanted to kind of like follow up with that because I believe me and you had talked about it like from our past show, and I wanted to kind of like see what your take is at. Like do you think that's like a good revolutionary influence with what he's been doing lately economically?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, some folk think that just because he showed up at some sort of World Economic Forum thing, that just because he showed up there, then that somehow means that he agrees with the World Economic Forum or he's secretly involved. It's just a lot of people look at things from a black and white perspective, is what I'm saying. Just because somebody showed up at something, it doesn't necessarily mean to say, oh, well, they're secretly involved in something, you know what I mean? It's not the case. But in terms of Javier Milei, look at the rapid change that he made in very challenging times. Given the fact that you've got to remember, Argentina's inflationary rate was absolutely insane. I think it was at more than 200% or something like that, right? It's just their inflation was way out of control, which didn't surprise me why he ended up winning an election anyhow, despite how passionate his argument was. And this is a thing, because in a rapid, short period of time, he was able to significantly reduce their inflationary rate, like significantly. I think it's like down to, well, the last time I checked, he managed to reduce it down to 48% annual rate of inflation. If you can contrast that to what it was before, it's like an enormous difference. Like he significantly reduced it. I think it's like, I don't know if you consider it the monthly rate. It's like just under 2 or 3% or something like that. But nonetheless, I think that right now it's one of those things that you're left thinking to yourself: is he truly gonna get rid of inflation like completely? Is he really truly gonna get there? And the way to look at things is actions always speak louder than words. Now, I've no reason to disbelieve that he can do that. You've got to also take into consideration the fact that he came across a very challenging point. That is to say, their economy ended up facing a recession. And what people don't understand is when you face a recession, your economy grinds to a halt. I tried to explain that even to an Argentinian friend I've got, because he was a bit sceptical, and I was saying to him, well, the problem that Argentina's been facing of recent is that, and it's not Javier Milei's fault, this is due to the mess that socialism had caused beforehand, that he's had to inherit a style of economy that's been through such a mess. And whilst trying to reverse all of that mess, that recession was naturally coming about. And the thing is it's kind of like it's a combination between the recession and the inflation. So what you've got is what you call stagflation, right? So in other words, that's what Argentina was facing, and that meant that their productivity levels just drastically decreased. And you know yourself, the only way that you can completely rid the economy of inflation as such is so that you've got your productivity levels or and above your monetary supply. Now this is the thing, because that, you know, Javier Milei stopped the printing of the currency. That was how he managed to significantly reduce the inflation in the first place, and that's why. See, once, and I'm not, because I haven't looked recently, but see, I firmly believe that once that recession's out the way, and if he can manage to, you know, again vastly increase the productivity levels, there's no reason for, you know, to disbelieve in the fact that he could potentially seriously get rid of that inflation and see Argentina, you know, plunging the country through deflation, which would be amazing to see, because you would see their consumer prices significantly drop then. You would seriously see a massive change in their economy, their rapid growth, and it would be very, very, put it this way, it would be very, very difficult for anybody on the political left to turn around then and say, "Oh, look at Argentina and look at what a failure their free market libertarian economics are." You know, you always hear that nonsense, but at the extremely, you know what I mean? And that's the funny thing, because I think that if things continue on, and this was the other point, he was facing that recession on the build up towards the election in May earlier this year. And the very fact that he won, he managed to remain in power. He won the election, and it's basically, I think there was a post saying that a lot of the younger ones are more in support of Melee. That's huge. That's the younger generation. that's massive.
Mm.
You can't understate that, and that's why it'd be so beautiful to see them going through deflation, because you think what that would do for the younger ones and a lot of the support, not just in Argentina. Like a lot of those in the United States are across the West in general, like across Britain and that. They wouldn't be able to turn around and say, "Oh, you know," because you always hear this nonsense. They always use, like, when it comes to Hong Kong or Singapore, they say, "Oh, you know, it's only because they are city states." And how often have you heard that load of nonsense? I mean, what are they going to say, that Sweden was a city state or something like that? Sweden's a fucking country. you know what I mean? So they've ran out of excuses. They've seriously ran out of excuses.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said in the past, and I've made note to this to like any like libertarian that kind of supports like the whole idea of use a political, you know, representative that can like be close to the ideas of libertarianism to destroy the state more. I don't find that to be hyper effective, but in this case with Javier Milei, if he is continuing to do good things while he's playing the game of like dealing with, you know, everybody else at the ruling class, at least he's chopping down the tree, and that can actually, you know, spark something out of like, you know, what, you know, true pure libertarians actually want. And I think it's very possible. I think philosophically that the whole goal is not to win elections, but the goal is to have that economic philosophy to be actually seen between a lot of people. And I think that's always like the big debate whenever people get confused with, you know, those that are pure minarchists that want to be free, but then, you know, when they don't understand like what true freedom with anarchy could be, it's like that's where they start getting stuck with too many fundamental flaws to be like, well, you know, we need to like, you know, bring it down to the local level of having government power. And I think that's just like that's like the bigger, like, you know, problem. It's like people don't see the issues of like, you know, as the state grows bigger and then they start, you know, expanding their economic restrictions more. People don't realize that it's not the person who's in power that's holding all the corruption. It's the coercive monopolies that the state keeps strangling on certain parts of the economy, making it harder for people to live their lives more sustainably. So, you know, there's like a reason why third world countries and second world countries still remain poor, and they haven't gone past that stage of trying to become first world. Because if if there was like a case for them to get past that poverty, you don't need to have like a political leader to get into office to fix that. You know, that's up to the people if they actually really want to change their like economy and actually not deal with all the government regulations that are holding them back. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right in what you say. I mean, a lot of it is down to government's restrictions and everything. it's the same thing. Like I've explained before, I've made it abundantly clear that you hear all the time, and my answer was never about building a wall or something about the usual of what you hear. All right, I can understand the argument of folks saying about controlling immigration and all that, and right, fair enough. I can understand for the perspective the laws of supply and demand. But what these folk completely ignore, and it was just like one the other day. I tried to, reason with him. I tried to explain to him, but it just seemed to go in one ear and out the other. And it's the fact that they're no looking at government and all its restrictions and the trouble that caused, because, they don't understand all the government's planning restrictions, its zonal laws, its heavy government regulation. All that stuff has not only limited and restricted the time to process, just to, get something planned ahead, just to get something built, even the costs involved. So costs on these construction companies and that, the costs have significantly increased just for the sake of any sort of plan involved of getting anything done. And therefore, it's no surprise when you look at property, it's so expensive. And this is a thing, because there was an example. At the time, it was the tallest cinema building in the world, in the heart of Glasgow. I don't know what company it was that owned that UGC cinema building or whatever, but whatever company it was, I think was running at a £1 million loss. I can't remember.
Oh wow,
they were basically running at a loss, and therefore the building owner, had to take back control or something, and that company was removed. But this is a thing, because how the hell are businesses supposed to survive trying to operate in this style of economy? Well, the private sector's all regulated, and businesses are trying to stay afloat. And it's not just all the restrictions, all the costs, all overhead costs of trying to operate in those properties, but the tax they're facing, whether it's the national insurance or everything else, all the taxes that cripple these businesses, and so it's no surprise. They struggle in general, and that's what governments do. Governments cause so much harm on the overall economy. It spills into so many things, like the unemployment, lack of employment opportunity, people's costs of living, the cost of housing, just everything. It just, people don't understand that it's because government's restrictions that did that, and that was the same story, the exact same story when it came to that the main American healthcare market. Because you hear it all the time, and I've said it before. Whenever I say to folk, "Oh well, I don't support the NHS. I support the full privatisation of the NHS," and they say, "Oh well, so you basically want us to end up with what Americans have got? Why?" And then they say, "Well, why don't you go live in America and experience their healthcare costs?" And I'm thinking to myself, you clearly don't understand why Americans ended up in that place in the first place. You know what I mean? They've not got any comprehension about things like, for example, if you were to ask them the question, what's the American Medical Association monopoly? What's the third? and you ask them the questions: who was responsible for it? What did it cause? They've no got a Scooby. They've not even got a Scooby. They're absolutely clueless.
That's how everything got screwed up because of them, and the state created that monopoly.
Aye, that's exactly.
So doctors' union. That's exactly what it was. That was the, that was the quote unquote, medical version of having antitrust laws in the medical field.
Exactly.
Just to prop them up, and then, this is where you get all your monopolized, medical fields where, it's a lot harder to become a doctor or a registered nurse or any other, medical, practice.
Exactly.
Like a position worker.
But that's what created that cartel with the giant pharmaceutical companies. it was government monopolization through that third-party payer system.
I was actually going to say, I actually looked at a study from the past before all the American, healthcare regulations came in to monopolize it more. This is predating to the early 1900s, but the average American paid less than I want to say $500 a year because back then. Yeah. Back then, at least in the early 1900s, it was a lot cheaper to get healthcare, but you didn't have to spend astronomical amounts of money just to get help for any medical, practice that you need done. But it's kind of like what you said about how if a free market was to be more independent, where businesses can privately exchange their services a lot more freer without state intervention. The cost of that, basically, that the cost of services would be far more effective and cheaper, but it's you would pay for what you actually want to afford for. And the problem with today's American a market for healthcare is that when the state got involved with more government regulations, you start to see the evolution of Medicaid and other social welfare services that makes it far more expensive just to afford your medical and dental care. So by the time when you go straight to the doctor or go to the dentist, you're paying more money up front for the deductibles, co-pays, everything that most people don't understand, because it's there's so many regulations that people don't look at that that make it harder for medical practices to even be offered, at the smallest, at the smallest level for what type of services that people want to pay for.
I mean, something that I would obviously add on to that fact that, $500 odd or something, $500 odd is a year is crazy to think about, right? But something I'll add to that is the fact that I know somebody might turn around and say to you, oh, well, what were American wages back in those days? Because obviously,
they're gonna play that stupid game of the wages weren't good back then, blah blah blah, and it's that was when minimum wage wasn't, making its way yet, and then that's when everything was a lot cheaper because businesses were able to compete a lot more easier back then versus today.
What they don't acknowledge is the fact that although wages, I mean, obviously wages aren't what you see today, what they completely ignore is the fact that their overall cost of living was significantly cheaper. Not just that.
Yeah, way before World War One, ever came around. Yeah,
they don't take into account the purchasing power, right? That's what they don't take into the wages. So, I mean, $500 a year was very much affordable, very much. And the only reason why, and this is another thing that they don't take into account, they'll say, oh, well, how was the overall healthcare back then? And then they try to compare that to, say, for example, the NHS of the late 1940s. The reason why it's such a silly argument for them to do that is because, obviously, people are going to be better off relative to their health in the late 1940s to that of people living in the 1880s, for example, or the 1890s.
Yeah.
Common sense would tell you that, because there was yet to come about the other medical discoveries.
Yep.
You know, that's just common sense. But all the improvement of people's health didn't come about because, it's because a government just a government just magically took ownership of a healthcare system.
Government interference is what makes market innovation become a thing. That's their stupid argument.
Do you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of that argument they try to make, as if to say, if government stepped in the 1700s and magically imposed all that, all that stuff, like to improve wages and stuff like that. They honestly think that could happen. In reality, see, if the government interfered way back then, it would have caused mass starvation. They would have wiped out the population. They would have caused a massive famine. And that's because the only reason why we were able to get out that mess was because of the capital, all the machinery that allowed us to mass produce. They don't understand that. They don't comprehend why work week hours, etc., reduced. It wasn't because, a government just stepped in with legislation. I mean, imagine a government doing that in the 1700s and reducing people's work week hours or something like that, through a legislation, and basically prevented children from working then. It just wiped them out. It's the reality.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because it kind of goes back to like what I've mentioned in the past. Whenever socialists ever bring up the claim to say, well, capitalism doesn't improve without some means of coercion, so they kind of conflate the whole colonialism argument to say, well, without imperialism, you wouldn't have the things that you have. And I'm like, well, that's pretty stupid to say, because it's like any government civilization that was corrupt back then did not advance their technology with coercion. That coercion had to be destroyed from within. Therefore, the people had to come to a point of philosophy to say that this government is too corrupt and we can't progress any further. So we can't live in this type of society in order for us to exist. I'll use like the Roman Empire as a good example. They had the ability to create steam-powered energy, but why didn't they? They were going to war too much. They were fighting too much. But by that stupid argument to say the only way that a market or a free market ever becomes more effective and powerful is only due to coercion, and that's simply not true. Because
it's market freedom that basically enabled all that innovation and that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I could kind of like use the example of when a community comes together to disobey a society that's coercive to them, they eventually use self-defense to resist vigilantly against those that are oppressing them. So when you are trying to create a first-class civilization where people are self-reliant and they help each other out, that starts with one, decentralized communities where people can gain trust, and then eventually over time those people start building a strong working class where people can bring about better jobs and better opportunities. So it's not like that people have to be divided and we have to like have these crazy coercive ruling class structures in order to progress, because that's simply not true. Because there's no such thing as just being upper class or middle class. It's all about basically it's all about your foundation of like how you raise your family and how you bring about your wealth, whether it's through hard work or if you're having some sort of political connection. That's simply due to people being reliant off of other people's financial wealth.
I mean, seldom, and that's true. Seldom anything has came from the government. Seldom, right? For example, the internet But when it was used with the military, for example, it was something inefficient. And yet, what was it that made such a thing and created the World Wide Web? Well, it wasn't until it was put to the market, and it was the market that basically created the World Wide Web and made it something efficient, right? So seldom do you ever come across something created by government and all that, and you look through recorded history, as it's been abundantly clear. Those countries that have went down the road of coercion, and they've basically destroyed, limited, restricted things like innovation and that. And like I says about, I've stated before in the past, the likes of the Soviet Union, they were being subsidised by the West. That's the reason why they were getting all their technology and that. They got it for the West. That's the reason why the Soviet Union were driving about in Ford Motors.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna basically add into that to say that you don't get to any first class civilization by coercing your population and then somehow, a different means of political philosophy just naturally changes people's, way of thinking to be more, accepting of one another and people sustain. And I think like to me personally, like whenever I look at first class nations like the U.S., that's not a civilization that is together, and there's no unity within the civilization because there's still coercion being put into the equation where a lot of people choose to be divided rather than trying to come together to help people out. So I think but the breaking point for that is that you have to have that self-reliance element where people disobey authority and they create communities essentially to have that trust, because there is a difference between people that are self-reliant that create civilizations based off of hard work ethic versus those that are heavily dependent and they have those very like less progressive but more degenerative communities that are based off of what the welfare state that creates that mindset of not working hard and holding people back further.
I mean, the very reason why those countries and that, and why socialism cannot lead to such an innovative style economy and whatnot is essentially down to the knowledge problem that F.A. Hayek had argued. It's largely down to prices. It's all down to when they go down the road of central planning, and there's two things that destroy prices. And of course, a lot of people just don't understand prices. They don't understand how important prices are. It's not just for the sake of gathering the information of what to produce and what to stop producing, where to allocate scarce resources and stop allocating, what to invest in and stop investing, etc., etc. It's not just a case of all of that. It's the fact that they don't comprehend that it's through price signal information that enables you to basically know, to gather the knowledge for such a vast economy or any individual sector, for the knowledge to technologically improve things for that. And you can give historical examples of this. The NHS was a fine example because they could not technologically improve their computer systems and all the data.
Yeah.
They couldn't technologically improve because they didn't have the information of prices because it's fixed at free at the point of use. Likewise, it was the same story when it came to British Rail. You'll remember Britain was heavily nationalised before Thatcher, and British Rail was the nationalised rail, And the thing is that when it was nationalised, not only was it running at nearly a £1 billion deficit, it had the shortage of passenger journeys.
That's a lot.
it had the outdated trains and the strikes, etc. This is the thing. The reason why it had the outdated trains, they couldn't technologically improve. The same story for exactly why Cuba has been driving about in 1950s motors. Folk don't realise that's no something of a fashion statement. That's the reality of what happens when government centrally plans and destroys the information of profits and losses. That's that.
Yeah, I agree. I think like what's really terrible is that a lot of the socialists in the Western world that are trying to push for that worldview while not going over to those countries and actually living their fantasy, they think it's funny to see people suffer and die. But then when I talk back at people from the Scandinavian countries and say, well, we're doing good over here, but you Americans are doing worse over there. And I'm like, well, why aren't you guys coming over here to kind of prove how bad is it over here? Because the good thing that the U.S. does have is that it's a decent nation where people have better means to keep their income. Not every state is quote unquote like that, but when you compare any state like the Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, all those nations are terrible. They're taxing their populations way higher, and people aren't living any better. The younger population, they're not enjoying themselves. Like, they're having to work like what, at least well past over 40 hours every week just to barely hang on. But the main thing is that the financial deficit of having a nation with a mixed economy where you're getting taxed higher, but you're keeping less of your profits and income, that's not good for your family long term. You're going to be losing more money, and then eventually, all that tax that's being dedicated to the welfare state, it's holding you back, and you're going to create less profit over time when you retire, and you're not going to hold on to that. That's going to be gone by the time when you try to hit your retirement age. So,
I mean, when they constantly go on about those Scandinavian countries there,
yeah.
they completely ignore the very fact that those countries are sitting with a severe lack of productivity in their domestic economy. Their unemployment rates are much higher than their official figure.
Way higher.
Aye. And this is the problem, because they're no... And if they were so-called as rich as they claim to be, why is the United States of America the one 100% financing all their medical research? And if I remember right, they're subsidising their healthcare systems as well.
Yeah, they do. American corporations have their pockets in there, so it's like Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. All those nations are basically bowing down to the U.S. as we speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that
yeah, because I was also going to bring in like the UK too, because like Britain has so much crazy tax debt, tax debt, deficits and all that, with all their industries being heavily subsidized through the US too.
Oh, the sad reality is the fact that a bunch of idiots have ruined the... Put it this way, the Conservative Party here is no different to the Republican Party in the United States.
True.
And this is the thing, because as a consequence of that, it meant that the Conservative Party ended up bombing it. And even although Labour never got a majority, it was why the Labour Party were able to get in. And they are absolute buffoons. They are some of the daftest you could have. They gotta
be real stupid just to talk like that.
And that's the thing, because of those idiots, they've hit with so many taxes and other things. I distinctly tell them that you watch, if Labour Party gets in, what they'll do is they'll break the promises that they made to you. All they're gonna do is just basically make you the promises, but they'll cut back elsewhere to compensate paint for what it is that they're promising you. So they're promising you, you know, more funding into the NHS and all this nonsense. And people believe all the rhetoric because folk can't see the reality. Because see, for the past decade or so, we've been hearing this same old excuse, the same old excuse. And the excuse this time, in fact, I wouldn't even say this time because it's such a common excuse you hear all the time. They say, oh, the NHS is only failing because it's underfunded. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Underfunded? The government has spent more into the NHS in the past decade alone than previous decades, and you can actually see it. You can look it up for yourself and you can see the real expenditure into the NHS is at an all-time high. Like, there's a wee stagnant period for about 2010 to about 2013, but from 2013 to 2020, like, there's a vast increase of real expenditure into it, and they're saying, oh, it's underfunded. So the reality is, it never was underfunded. It was getting more and more funding into it. And that's the thing, because the likes of the Labour Party played on that. They then used that as an excuse to say, oh, well, here's why you should vote us. We'll offer you a lot more funding into the NHS. And I distinctly tell them, I says, you watch. Soon as the Labour Party gets in, you'll see cutbacks elsewhere in order to pay for it. And you know what happened? The Labour Party got in, and then they started cutting people's, you know, what was it? They started cutting it started with the winter fuel payment. It was something to do with pensions or something like that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody was up in arms like, oh, what happened?
The jobs being cut back. Oh no, I need a protest over that.
Exactly. I says that to them. I distinctly says that to them, and they're like, as if they're surprised. Like, I fucking tell you.
Yeah, they're losing money. They can't produce anything.
Exactly. I seen that coming a mile off. I seen that coming a mile off.
Fire is falling.
It really is. It's insanity. It's just a lot of folk are sadly just driven by emotion.
Yeah.
It's just people don't actually live in the real world yet.
Yeah, I agree. I was just gonna follow up with that and say, like, with what I mentioned in the past about like the U.S. going through this massive debt crisis along with other Western European nations, like, would there ever come to be like a time when there is like a true breaking point where, you know, it could be similar to like a Great Depression, but it would be much worse. Like, there would be something where, like, I wouldn't say it would be like World War III level bad, but like don't you remember back in World War II when the Great Depression was to be occurred, like, you know, according to the historians, but at that time and frame, like, basically at that time frame, like, a lot of nations were in super massive debt, and the only reason why most of them ever got into debt was due to the immense amount of money printing and creating all this like crazy debt notes to try to force into other countries. And I think like this is kind of like a cycle that every, you know, governing institution does from any nation that's like trying to like force debt onto but the next generation. I think I think personally. Oh, like, I'm sorry. Did you have something to say?
Oh, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think it's just a matter of time, because let's face it, it's like a cycle that you're talking about. It's basically just like you say, it's just basically like a cycle. What you're seeing today is exactly what you saw that led to the Great Depression and things like that. And
Yeah.
arguably, no doubt about it, it will be worse in the past. And the thing is, it might not happen in our generation, but when it comes to the American dollar,
Yeah.
I've no doubt that it will eventually collapse. And when that happens, folk that solely depend on the paper currency, and you're talking about most of the population, because let's face it, most people don't really think into assets, right? A lot of people don't. See all those that rely on the paper, their entire life savings will just evaporate to nothing overnight. And you know, the harsh reality is they would end up committing suicide.
Yeah, because I was just gonna say, like, if there was like a breaking point where everybody's basically poor to the level where hyperinflation does take over and central banks are trying so hard to kind of make people poor, to say, oh well, I'm sorry, your $500,000 or $30 million is sitting inside of the bank, it's no longer valuable. So whatever paper currency that you take out, you're basically just screwed. So it's like, I don't want to see it like that. Like, I think there should be something where, especially from from like the libertarian lens, that people need to have like a backup plan where if you could like take your assets away from the bank and you could create some sort of like decentralized chain where you can like put your money through some sort of like trusted business that could hold on to it. Like, I think that the whole idea of banks, holding on to people's money is probably going to come to a dire disaster, because it's like, yes, like to a degree, like most banks that are federal credit unions, like they do have that measure of quote unquote holding on to your money, but to a particular degree, if they do fail, and you meet in that criteria to kind of demand some sort of restitution back if they do something wrong, like with your money, there has to be like some sort of backup plan to like get away from that before that even happens. If you have a lot of assets.
There's a prime example. I mean, you look at, for example, what I'm considering, and eventually once I get the things that I need to get for the sake of my photography, because I'm currently trying to save for it through my work, and some of those things are expensive. For example, like the Mavic Pro drone, that 4 one.
Oh wow!
That costs, like, if to get the 512 gigabyte one, you're talking 3,200 quid. That's
a lot of money.
Yeah, that's with
a lot of money.
That's without their 3-year warranty thing. And then on top of that, I need to get a new mobile phone. Mobile phones are no cheap these days. And this is the point, right? But see once I'm able to then, start saving and putting money away, because I'm thinking of doing, see, like you've got an ISA sort of an account sort of thing. But even when you look at these things like the ISA accounts, from what I've heard, even then I think they tax you over a certain threshold. Like, you know what I mean? Which is just wrong, and that's even in that. So they try to get you in every sort of way. And socialists would love nothing more than to try and tax you on your actual assets.
Capital gains, inheritance tax, investment tax before you even get the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Robbery, man.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to put myself in that position, because I'm trying to save up my finances for generational wealth for my own family. So, but I was going to probably even connect that to, like, I guess, like what's happening at the international level. I heard something crazy about what the IMF was trying to do lately, and I want to say this was like something that came from the Mises Institute, but apparently the IMF, they're really trying so hard to kind of enforce this massive like I don't know what they're doing, but I want to say that they're trying to do some Orwellian nonsense to try to like create like a one world currency with like a digital currency tracker where everything that you own is based off of like a social credit score, and it's just like, dude, like honestly, like I see it failing like right away, but it's just like for people to even think that's okay, it's like I
Do
just
you know
think.
what this reminds me of? And the funny thing that you've just mentioned that. Are you aware of the Reform Party in the UK?
I think I've heard of it. Yeah,
Led by the likes of Nigel Farage and that.
yeah. Nigel Farage. Yep, I know who he is.
Apparently, that because this was meant to be like the populist party to go against the globalists and all the rest of this to finally shake things up. Just
Social
the usual,
populist party.
exactly, the usual nonsense, and I just recently found out that I just recently found out that through reforms, apparently from what they're arguing for now is in favour of things like the central bank saying that. Because see if there's any truth in that, that's the fun for. Because that's essentially that, one world currency is, by the way. That's essentially what it is. It's that central bank currency, and I think that's what they're showing. Not just here, but they'll want to push that onto Americans as well. It means that they can control your money, control what it is you're buying. Or they can control your spending, they can control and see what you're spending your money on. Privacy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I also wanted to just know. I think your audio is like a little bit like low. I just wanted to point that out. Um, but yeah, I think overall it's like it's like it's a very evil globalist idea that a lot of people like to fearmonger over. And what I don't like, especially from like Americans that try to like fearmonger over it, they think as if like people aren't going to do anything about it, as if this is just all part of what the plan, and you have to just basically sit there and just accept it. But no, like you have the power to not participate and actually protest against it. But you don't just do it by just trying to like use some sort of political party to try to fix that. I think if anything, as much as I don't think all the options are always there, but it's probably better to kind of like take your money out of the central banks and find certain alternatives to kind of create like a certain network, to hold on to your money effectively. I was kind of trying to think like, well, I mean, I don't personally think crypto is all perfect, but I was possibly maybe thinking like maybe it could be possible one day to maybe try to have cryptocurrency with paper currency, so you can kind of connect it to it. Therefore, it can kind of create like that little backup type of idea to help people out.
Well, this is, I mean, it depends where things go in that, relative to what people choose overall. But I think you're right in what you say. At the end of the day, it's take for argument's sake, relative to having to do with Donald Trump and the recent stuff. There are a lot of American people that have become disillusioned, not just because of the so-called big beautiful bill, but things to do with losing trust and faith in them, not releasing the Epstein files and things like that. So the point being is the fact that example has shown you that a lot of people are turning against it, and that won't go in their favour. That won't go in the favour of the elite. Certainly won't. same thing with central bank digital currency. It just
Yeah, I definitely agree. People having to think that's that's always going to be the end all be all to just listen to the politics and just let it figure itself out. I think it's a very deceptive means to lead to despotism in that way. Philosophically, to my personal belief, but yeah, I think overall, as far as like the future of where things could go economically in I would say the global economy, it would be better to kind of, you know, find means to break away from fiat and make, different, underground currencies to kind of help people out more. Because even though like certain people that do advocate for gold and silver, that's good and all, but like maybe if it is possible, like you could have some sort of like similar version of fiat, but make it actual like real paper currency where people can trade assets a lot easier. I mean, look, the barter system is good, but it's not like it's not all the way perfect.
the whole thing is that I think there will eventually be that decentralization. And you never know, it might get to the stage when you've got competing, decentralized sort of currencies and stuff like that. And, things. I think it will be a case of that. Especially when going to be a reaction against globalists trying to create some sort of centralized digital currency something. I think there will be alternatives. The market will find a way anyway. Whatever it is it decides, then it will be the case. Nonetheless, the most powerful thing that you have is informed populace. Because see if you've got informed populace know what they're talking about, then game over for those that try to control, because that's what the elite require. They require a population that's ignorant of other countries. That's why they try to keep people in the dark.
Yeah, I agree. I think once there's a point in time where people are able to trade away from the state to find means to economically like break it externally with not having to participate in the status fiat money. I think that's going to be like the breaking point. It's definitely not in the way of like what certain people argue with agorism in a way. I think like when people create like that market revolution to have like decentralized trading routes that are far more powerful than for state market controlled like economies, that's when you'll start to see first class nations become far more successful when their you know um, economic trading routes are basically split from the state, and then the state loses its power a lot more astronomically. So it's like granted, like any massive state in the U.S. that actually does that and becomes very successful, that could be like another Prospera out in Honduras. And if that does happen, then libertarianism will win. It's just that granted, like gradually going into that direction is far better to do it incrementally rather than just saying, okay, let's just go straight up to accelerationism and just break everything down, because that's not going to work. And everybody that, well, I wouldn't say everybody, but for the people that do think that's a good idea, that's not going to help anybody out.
It goes back to that whole point of Argentina. It will influence and those countries force them to compete to a certain extent.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, like I also wanted to kind of ask a few more questions before I go. I wanted to ask like your thoughts about the whole thing with Donald Trump's tariffs. it seems like that the whole tariff war has gotten a lot worse, and I want to say that he's increased tariffs by at least like I forgot. I want to say it's at least 50% or higher.
Well, this is the thing, because there was that example, and I don't know if I mentioned it before, but because I was doing the research on the Mavic Pro 4 drone, I seen that a lot of Americans are either Americans crossing the border to go to Canada to try and buy for there, or trying to basically order to Canada simply because of the tariffs that harms the American consumer. As you know, DJI is like one of those sort of Chinese companies. But this is a thing, because those that are arguing the protectionist tariffs, they think it's just a case of protecting the jobs. They don't understand the line to them that if a government has to protect an industry, if a government has to protect so-called jobs domestically, what does that tell you? Well, it tells you something, that if they have to protect those specific jobs, say that of foreign competition, it means that those domestic jobs or industry clearly weren't good enough to compete with the foreign competitors. In other words, consumers won't compete. If consumers, by choosing the foreign company or the domestic companies, what that's really telling you is the consumer favours whatever it is that's foreign, right? See, when a government tries to force its way and tries to protect that of the domestic industry, in that case, all the government's doing is redirecting capital, such as, you know, labour, and misdirecting the market for resources to where the market was not in demand. And that's essentially what tariffs do. Tariffs not only increase the costs and prices on the domestic consumer and restrict their options relative to, you know, what they can get. You know, it basically harms them relative to jobs. The government ends up misdirecting capital into the wrong parts of the market where consumers otherwise would not have chosen. And this is the reason why it's such a silly argument that people make, and I've even seen the excuses they make up, and they say, oh well, there's bargaining chip. Now, see, to be honest with you, you could easily solve America's problem by tackling the root causes and freeing their market up for government. Honestly, and the reason being is because it would make the United States thrive as a country as a whole. It would make the United States fiercely competitive in the market, and it would force others to sit up and take notice. You know, I mean, could you imagine the United States turning towards a free market economy? It would override the problems that you see relative to what China does and stuff like that. It would completely override it.
I agree. I think the U.S. is probably one of the most strongest economies throughout the whole world. I think America being closer to a more stronger libertarian aspect of like what a pure free market could look like, with all the assets that businesses can have to uplift people's economic freedom, but also people can stand together in a more stronger like network of bringing more innovation and newer ideas to help communities grow stronger, because what prevents that from happening is that too much government intervention is what's killing the economy, and therefore people are choosing to say it's okay to destroy innovation, pull people back further, and then create these dreadful generations where people are using too much, government services for welfare, and that's just creating, crappy generations. That's holding people back. That's creating the vigilant, communities where people think it's okay to, be violent and just hold people down. But yeah, but the U.S. has the capability to have that type of worldview where the libertarian worldview can easily be achieved. It's just that there's way too much state intervention that holds a lot of things back. But ideally, if that were to ever come by tomorrow, I would be happy to hold the rest of my money that's that keeps being taken by the federal and state. So once the IRS gets taken down, then I'll be happy.
Well, that's true. I mean, honestly, it's one of these things. It's true.
I'll be waving, gold and black flags rather than red, white, and blue. So, black and yellow over red, white, and blue. Yeah. Yeah. The final thing I wanted to kind of talk about was the whole deal with man, I forgot what was going on with them. I forgot what was being discussed, but I think it was something to do with the whole AI debate, and I wanted to get your take on this. A lot of people that are criticizing the whole AI situation, they're saying that AI can be powerful enough to take over everybody's jobs. So therefore, if AI were to take our jobs, then we as a human species would be more lazier, and then we would just be less productive.
The major problem with their argument when they keep it with these things, and the thing you've got to understand is the fact that people need money, and the reason being is because, think about it this way: if you didn't have an economy that operates on the basis of money, then you've no got an economy that operates on the basis of prices. If you've no got an economy that runs on the basis of prices, then you're faced with the same problem that socialism's faced with. Now, the reason why this is a serious issue is because people don't understand artificial intelligence isn't good enough to solve the economic calculation problem, the knowledge problem. It can't solve those problems. No, unless they are thinking of open up people's heads and tampering with their brains. You know what I mean? But other than that, the best that they've got is, take for example, and this, by the way, this is quite Orwellian to begin with, but you probably know it's discussing something and you've got your mobile phone or whatever, right? You've got your mobile phone and you're just discussing whatever it is. And you'll notice on social media some advertisement pops up and speaking about even though you've searched anything or that. That's perhaps where they think they can take advantage of them. But what they don't take into account is the fact that people's demands are far above and beyond those wee conversations. People's demands also change all the time, so it's sporadic. So it's impossible for artificial intelligence to solve a problem of economic calculations. So it would not hold the information of how much to produce, what to produce, where to allocate scarce resources, because this is a reality. You live on a scarce resources, and therefore you live in an economy where prices are required. Now, that also correlates to the point how then are people going to be able to buy goods? You know, they don't just get money handed to them and that's it. You have to work for it. So the truth of the matter is, it's for that reason that AI is not replacing labour. It's merely coming in as an assistance to labour. It might free up specific jobs and allow people more free time to then allocate that time into doing other more important work, and therefore it acts as that sort of assistance. But it's not going to completely eradicate labour because people need money. That's just reality. Therefore, since they need money, they need jobs. And it's just like, you know, myself as a photographer.
Yeah, you would lose your job right away.
Yeah,
like,
so
no, you wouldn't.
Exactly. Their assumption is that I would lose my job, but I would lose it with my photography and stuff like that. But they don't understand that where AI is really going to come in place to help with photography. You take, for example, pet photography. If I photograph a pet that's got the leash on him, AI is just so good at removing me things like that. In Photoshop, it can speed up your process. It can help with, you know, landscape photography, especially if you do panoramic image. And because if you photograph water is something that moves because the waves are coming in, and from shot to shot to shot to shot, it's not all going to be lined up when the water moves because the waves are coming into each what we are taking. So in order to blend that all together, that's where AI comes in, because that speeds up the process and merge it together and make it appear as realistic as possible. So that's the purpose of AI. What AI cannot replace relative to photography is a person going out there and capturing moments. That's not something AI can do.
Yeah.
You know, AI might create an image of a dog, but that's no creating an actual moment that happened of someone's dog outside when running about. It's characteristic. It's not able to mimic a personality.
Yeah.
Generic stuff on dogs. You understand my point. There's limitations with artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I think AI is going to be more of an innovation supplemental add-on rather than just taking any job, because like I had this like one argument with like one person the other day telling me, well, AI can just take anything over. Think about it with like companies like McDonald's. You just walk in, you know, but the computer tells you, hello, welcome to McDonald's, you know, place your order. And then it's like, okay, but what if nobody's not there to like manage like the food if it goes bad? Or what if the food just doesn't taste good and I want to have new food? Like people just think like, okay, like your standard business like a McDonald's would be just all robots coming to you, and then you'll just get your food and then you'll just go about your way. And it's not like that. It's, you know, it's a very strenuous process that takes a lot of human elements that would not be replicated the same way, because people think of it more like a Terminator or kind of like a iRobot situation, if you ever watched that movie. Like they just think of the surrogacy of like a human, you know, personality would be the same way if like a robot were to talk to you, and you have like the means to just have like a regular conversation with somebody, when that's clearly not true, because no robot can emulate the human, you know, element of just getting to know you and actually giving you like a service that you are walking into like a store for.
It's this is the thing. It's convenient that they would mention anything about McDonald's, because what was it that brought about the AI, or shall I say the automation within those kiosks and things like that. What was it that brought ordering things? Well, the reality is, what brought it about was the minimum wage. That's what caused it. It's an example of how their own policies that they supported ended up creating this. Whereas if you took away things like the minimum wage and you freed the market up, guaranteed you would see a lot more human labour working in those stores in McDonald's. Guaranteed.
Yeah, because I think like when people keep complaining about there's not enough money to be made in industries that just pay your like I'm not trying to be rude, but like when people bring up with the whole IQ situation to say, well, if you're this IQ, you're going to be working at McDonald's for the rest of your life. And it's like, no, that's not true. You can become whatever you want in the world, but nothing in life is free or guaranteed. So you cannot tell me that in order for you to work a high level job, you must be the overachiever to go to school, and therefore college is going to make you successful. That doesn't define a man's wealth or success, nor a woman's success in any means of life. So the way that you get to that level is that education is a portion of how you become successful, but it's also putting yourself out there to multiple employers to expand your skills to get to where you're at. Like for me, like I want to get into my field for IT and cybersecurity, but that doesn't mean I just stop at just learning cybersecurity only and not learning other things. I want to learn IT support. I want to become a systems administrator. I want to learn how to make stuff so I can develop certain ideas with tech machinery for computers. But that doesn't mean AI will stop me to getting to where I need to go.
Exactly.
Like if anything, I want to learn it, I want to develop with it, and I want to help myself and help other people out with it. That's where the whole debate is technically destroyed, because just because people try to fearmonger about like the whole like crazy situation that androids will just come out of nowhere and then somewhat Terminator's just here, or actually, I was going to bring up Mortal Kombat because somebody brought up like a Cyberlin Quay joke with me to say if AI were to be completely smart, it would be the Cyberlin Quay taking over. And I'm like, you realize that those people ended up dying at the very end of their run. So basically, all the robots would just get EMP'd, or they'll probably just be very stupid to the point where they have no consciousness. But better yet, like, you know, idealistically and realistically, like the AI robot that is developed in the sense of being a assistant to the human psychic is basically the main role of what the AI will do. It's not a innovation tool where it's going to think like a human, it's going to talk like one. AI is supposed to be the assistant to act as a means to, you know, uplift human labor, and therefore we don't have to do all the hard work to get to where we need to accomplish.
Funny
Because,
enough,
yeah,
I mean, Copilot, as an example, whether it views itself as smarter than most people out there. And I think its response was quite interesting because although it says it doesn't have like the way us humans do and stuff like that, obviously, it definitely views itself as certainly more capable than people, and the reason it gives that response is because it doesn't base things off a sort of bias. It doesn't base things off of feelings. It bases it off of a large repository that it's got, and therefore if you discuss things with, for example, Copilot, and you discuss on things like the economic calculation problem, knowledge problem, you make Copilot aware of those things. Because of its large repository, it then gets around to the point where it's impossible to make an argument favourable to socialism. And because Copilot's not driven by emotions, it's given an answer that is reasonable, is strong, and that's something that, you know, stems from the very fact that it's got a large base of information. You know, it's not based on some sort of thing that's driven by emotions, whereas people are. A lot of the time, people are. They don't like facts, reason, and logic, and that's something that you only really get through artificial intelligence. This is where I feel artificial intelligence can be a huge, huge help. And you're given it as an example of its ability to assist. I basically asked Copilot for its thoughts on my YouTube channel, Libertarian, Scott, and it was able to cycle through my general channel and give a response back in a matter of seconds, right? And basically, you know, give its thoughts and all sorts. Surprisingly, it's even able to read what I say. But for all that information, it is so hugely helpful, because even when it came to me saying that I'm going to do a particular video sometime near future on the housing crisis, it's able to give me information and historical examples that I ask it for. There's a prime example on Venezuela. I asked artificial intelligence if it could provide me any articles for 2003 showing the evidence that the price ceilings caused the shortages, and it dug out an actual article there that was able to direct me straight to the source. And that's why it's such a huge help, because say for example I go today, which of course I will at some point, but say for example I go today particular videos on things like, for argument's sake, the knowledge problem or on the housing crisis, it's able to dig out exactly what I'm talking about, but provide me historical examples that I might not even be aware of. You know what I mean? That's why it's such a massive help. But it admitted to me, Copilot had admitted to me what gives me personally a huge advantage over other people is the fact that other people might use artificial intelligence like a search engine, whereas I wasn't using it as a search engine. I was giving it data. I was giving it information that's showing that I already understand things like the economic calculation problem, etc. And since I'm able to understand all that and give it that information, it's able to then take from that and add on top of it and give me things from, such as the recorded examples to
I just think AI, with all the great market innovations that you could build with it, would make human labor far more easier. And think about all the hard labor jobs that people had to break their backs and, you know, basically almost die going to work. That could be erased by having AI drones that are created to help those industries grow. Like, especially like I said in the past, like think about other industries like the gaming industry having AI or the medical industry having AI. Like, there's so many great ideas that you can expand with AI, but it would be so good to the point where it would expand a lot better for the jobs that actually need that labor, because if that does create a labor-saving innovation to reduce the cost of production, and therefore, you know, but the cost of jobs are less used for that position, then that'll make jobs far more valuable, because therefore businesses have more money to spend for other positions that they can give employees for a greater opportunity. Like, I had like one conversation with one person that was like a artist that kind of told me like AI as like bad because they're afraid like, oh well, I'm not gonna have like my job to like make my own art. But then I asked them like, wait a minute, like I know a person like you that's a photographer, and you have to make sure that the art is nice and well lit within your production to make sure your work is properly presented. So it's like you using AI for the right reasons to make your job easier and faster compared to somebody that makes art by hand, knowing that if they got the skills to learn how to code AI or even use it and actually configure it the way that he or she wants to use it, then AI is not going to be the one taking your job away. It's going to make your job a lot easier. It's like, why wouldn't you want to have something like that to uplift your skill so you don't have to spend countless hours or even days just to get like a certain project done?
Even within cameras itself, I mean, a lot of people don't realise being a professional photographer does not mean picking up a camera and setting the focus to manual. Do you know what focus to manual means? I don't know if like you're aware of camera operation or stuff, but see like the focusing for, let's say for example, when you focus on a person or any subject, focusing manually means that you use the lens itself to twist the ring round and focus on the particular subject. That's what people think. They automatically think, well, manual on that sense must be professional. Not the case. Likewise, it's the same story where people think that on a camera at the top, setting it to manual must be what all professionals must do. And they make that mistake. And a prime example, when I was at photographing red swallows, the professional wildlife photographer that I did a one-to-one tour with, he had taught me using a priority. It's kind of like a sort of combination between manual and automatic. It's semi-automatic because if you set it to aperture priority, it basically means that you have full control over the aperture, but the camera itself is going to automatically set right? That's exactly what I mean. How even the basic things relative to automatic settings and things like that, how that technology is improving. You see now with artificial intelligence, I would not be surprised to see a lot of that cameras improve on this.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like pretty much back to like what I had initially said. The cost of production and labor would be far more effective and much cheaper, where you'll get way more work done within a day's worth of work versus like having to spend countless hours, if not more days, to get like very few projects done. Like I guess for any example within photography, you having AI completing the work that you do at a much faster rate is far better than somebody that did photography back in the 1800s or any point in time before the concept of creating like a digitalized photography was like a thing. So I think it's like a great idea to help markets grow much faster, and think about all the great ideas that businesses can come up with having more assistance with AI and creating more innovative tools to uplift their ideas a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, but like I don't want to hold you up if you gotta go. I'm pretty sure it's super late over there.
It's not too bad, but it gets later. I mean, to be honest though, like in terms of a minute and a half. So it's here and there. It's not too bad.
Okay, yeah. I don't mind doing this like again in the future. Whenever you're free. I always got good ideas to bring up for discussion, but I just figured having this good little talk would be pretty fun because I have like a lot on my mind today. So.
Aye, 100%.
All right. Well, yeah. I think that's about it. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, I think that's really. It's one of those things that we've addressed before, even on that Trump situation and the Facebook posts and things. You'll remember that thing with the cultists and things like that. I just think that it's one of these things that certain folk are just caught up. I think the majority of them would sit up and realise that it's probably don't get me wrong, you do go out and stuff like that, but just like what we discussed earlier on with Gabriel Neely, yeah, especially it's like
Yeah, I don't. I don't blame you. I mean, I've been busy like myself, so I haven't really cared to really, do so much content. But every now and then, whenever I do, I'll always come back around. But I usually try to just do more live streams rather than posting videos. But yeah, I appreciate the time, and hopefully we can do this again. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Unless you have anything else to say.
no, there's something about
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, and definitely like to do this again. And hopefully, the world in the UK is, definitely not as bad, and hopefully things can get better over there. So,
right.
all right, I will see you later, Scott.
Right, cheers.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. I'll see you. All right, guys, I am done. Wanted to kind of get this little show going for you. Some kind of events, history, and all that stuff. So I always like having these shows with them. So basically, what I'll do is I'm gonna get out of the studio and I'll do what I have to do to give you the outro. So thank you guys for watching, and hold on, I will give you guys the outro in 1 second. I'll be out of here. Alright, I'll be right back, and hold on. Alright. Alright, I'll see you guys later, and have a good day. That was the outro, so I'll see you guys. Have a good day. Peace.